How can a wild predator, an animal of tooth and claw, become the only source of peace for a child lost in a storm of his own mind? It began on a Monday morning in October, with the low hum of the kitchen refrigerator. For 10-year-old Leo Evans, that hum was not a sound. It was a monster, a physical weight pressing on his skull. He rocked back and forth at the kitchen table, his hands pressed hard against his ears. His mother, Sarah Evans, placed a bowl of oatmeal in front of him. He flinched. The texture was wrong today. Everything was wrong. The seam on his sock felt like fire. The tag on his shirt was 1,000 tiny needles against his neck. The yellow school bus would be here in 23 minutes. 23 minutes until the chaos, the noise, the crushing weight of 100 other children. Leo's rocking grew faster. A low moan escaped his lips. Before we continue, let us know from which city you are. We are interested to know from where our videos are watched. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave your rating. This gives us motivation to make new and interesting videos. So, let's get started. Sarah's face, etched with the familiar lines of exhaustion and love, softened. Okay, buddy, no bus today. I'll drive you. This was their daily battle. A war fought against invisible enemies. She was a single mother, working from a small desk in the corner of their living room. And these morning battles cost her hours of work, pieces of her sanity. But she would fight them forever for him. She snipped the tag from his shirt. She found his weighted vest, a small comfort against the sensory storm. The drive to Northwood Mountain Academy was silent, except for the rhythmic thud of Leo's head against the back of his seat. The school was nestled against the Blue Ridge Mountains, a beautiful place that for Leo was a fortress of anxiety. As Sarah pulled into the drop-off lane, the chaos erupted. Car doors slammed, children shouted, whistles blew. Leo's moan became a wail. He curled into a ball, his fingers clawing at his own hair. No, no, no. Sarah reached for him, ready to begin the painstaking process of coaxing him out of the car. But then, something impossible happened. Leo stopped. He went completely, utterly still. His wide, terrified eyes were fixed on something beyond the parking lot. His entire body was locked onto a single point at the edge of the woods, where the manicured school lawn met the wild chaos of the forest. Sarah followed his gaze. She saw nothing at first, just the morning mist clinging to the dark green rhododendron leaves. Then she saw it, a flicker of movement. An animal, the color of dead leaves and winter sunlight, sat with regal stillness. It was a bobcat, not 20 yards from the line of cars. Her tufted ears were alert, her yellow eyes unblinking. At her feet, 2 tiny kittens, no bigger than house cats, tumbled and played in the damp leaves. They were oblivious to the human world so close by. The bobcat was not. She was watching, not with aggression, not with hunger, just a calm, steady observation. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. A wild predator. Here. But Leo was transformed. The storm inside him had vanished. The rigid posture, the panicked rocking, the desperate sounds, all gone. He was breathing slowly, deeply. He stared at the creature, a look of profound, silent understanding on his face. He slowly unbuckled his seatbelt. He opened the car door. For the first time in 2 months, he walked out of the car and toward the school entrance without a single tear, without a single protest. He glanced back just once, a fleeting look toward the wood line, before disappearing inside the brick building. Sarah sat in her car, her hands shaking, staring at the bobcat. The creature held her gaze for a beat longer, then turned, melting back into the shadows of the forest with her kittens. The space where she sat was now just empty leaves. The next morning, Leo didn't fight. He pointed to the car keys. On the drive, his eyes scanned the woods with an intensity Sarah had only ever seen him direct at his intricate diagrams of star systems. As they pulled into the same spot, Sarah held her breath. He was there, the Bobcat, sitting in the exact same area, a silent sentinel in the morning mist. And once again, Leo's world found its center. He watched her for a full 5 minutes, then calmly went to school. It became their ritual, a secret pact between a boy, his mother, and a ghost of the forest. Every morning, between 7:45 and 8:15, the Bobcat would appear. Every morning, Leo would find his peace and walk into school. Sarah's overwhelming relief was shadowed by a creeping fear. This couldn't last. It was too strange, too fragile. Word began to spread. A teacher saw the cat from her classroom window. A student snapped a blurry photo on his phone. Soon, the Northwood Bobcat was a local legend. Children would press against the cafeteria windows in the morning, hoping for a glimpse. This new attention was a disaster. It brought noise, excitement, and unpredictability. Everything that shattered Leo's fragile calm. And it brought the attention of Principal Marcus Harrison. His world was one of rules, regulations, and liability insurance. A Bobcat habituated to the presence of children was not a charming local story. It was a lawsuit waiting to happen. He received a dozen calls from panicked parents. An email was sent out, warning everyone to stay away from the wood line. An announcement was made over the school's PA system, its crackling voice a jolt to Leo's system. Dr. Eris Thorne, the school's 50-something science teacher, watched the situation unfold with a different kind of interest. A former wildlife biologist, he saw something the others didn't. From his second-story classroom, he used a pair of worn binoculars to observe the Bobcat each morning. He took meticulous notes. Subject is a female, approx. 20-25 lbs. 2 kits, approx. 12 weeks old. He murmured into a small recorder. Posture is consistently relaxed, watchful, not hunting. Gaze follows the general flow of children, but does not fixate on any single one as prey. Highly unusual habituation. The question is not that she is here. The question is, why? He saw Sarah's old sedan parked in the same spot every day. He saw the small boy inside who never took his eyes off the animal. He saw the boy leave the car only after the cat was in view. He was a man of science, but he recognized a connection when he saw one. He just didn't have the data to explain it. The pressure on Principal Harrison mounted. A parent threatened to go to the local news. The school board was calling. He felt the walls closing in. He did what any administrator in his position would do. He made the call. Sarah was in her car with Leo, watching the Bobcat, when her phone buzzed. It was an automated message from the school. "Attention Northwood parents," a sterile voice announced. In the interest of student safety and in accordance with state protocols, we have consulted with the North Carolina Wildlife Resources Commission regarding the Bobcat on school grounds. They will be humanely trapping and relocating the animal and its young within the next 48 hours. The words hit Sarah like a physical blow. Relocation. For a mother Bobcat, that was often a death sentence. And for Leo? She looked at her son, who was peacefully watching the creature, his face serene. This would not just break his routine. It would break him. That afternoon, Sarah stormed into Principal Harrison's office, her hands trembling with fury. "You can't do this," she said, her voice low and shaking. Harrison looked up from his desk, his face a mask of weary resolve. "Ms. Evans, my responsibility is to the 300 students in this building. It's a predator." "She is not a threat," Sarah insisted. "You don't know that. You see what you want to see?" I see a risk I am not willing to take. This is the only thing that helps my son get through the day. Don't you understand what you're taking from him?" Her voice cracked. "I understand," Harrison said, his tone softening slightly, but his decision unwavering. "That I have to make decisions for the good of the entire community, not just one child." Desperate, Sarah turned to leave, her eyes burning with unshed tears. As she opened the door, she nearly collided with Dr. Thorne, who was standing just outside, a folder in his hand. He had clearly heard everything. He looked from the principal's closed-off face to Sarah's desperate one. "Ms. Evans," he said quietly, his voice calm and steady. "Perhaps I can help. I don't think that Bobcat is here by accident. I think she's trying to tell us something." He opened his folder. It was filled with notes, dates, times, and several grainy, long-distance photos of the Bobcat. "She's not watching the school," Dr. Thorne said, pointing to a photo. "She's watching for someone." Sarah stared at the folder, then back at Dr. Thorne's kind, weathered face. Hope, a feeling she hadn't dared to entertain, flickered weakly within her. "What do you mean, watching for someone?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dr. Thorne gestured for her to walk with him, away from the principal's office. "Let's go to my classroom. It's quieter." His room was on the second floor, a controlled chaos of terrariums, star charts, and geological maps. A faint smell of damp earth and old books hung in the air. He led her to a large window overlooking the exact spot at the wood line. On his windowsill lay his binoculars, his notebook, and a topographic map of the school's surrounding area, marked with small red pins. "I've been tracking her movements," he began, tapping the map. "She has a den about a half-mile in. It's a good spot, secure, near water. She has no reason to come here. There's no easy food source, no exposed garbage. She's expending energy and taking a risk for no logical survival reason." He handed her his notebook. It was filled with columns of dates, times, and observations written in a neat, scientific script. "Look," he said, pointing. "She arrives before the first bell. She leaves after the last child is inside. She ignores the squirrels, the birds. Her attention is on the drop-off lane. And your car, Ms. Evans. She often looks directly at your car." Sarah's mind reeled. "But why? Leo has we've never seen her before these last few weeks." Dr. Thorne leaned against the windowsill, his expression thoughtful. "Animals, especially intelligent predators, build a complex map of their territory. It's made of threats, resources, and neutral elements. Something, or someone, has taught that Bobcat that this area, and perhaps a specific person associated with it, is not a threat. She's not being aggressive. She's being present. It's a behavior I've never seen documented. To stop the trapping, we can't just say she's harmless. We have to prove why she's harmless. We need a reason." The next day felt like a countdown to an execution. Sarah drove to school with a knot of dread in her stomach. Leo, sensing her anxiety, was restless. He kept looking at her, his brow furrowed. As they pulled up, the Bobcat was there, as always. But today, the sight brought Sarah no relief, only a profound sadness. Leo watched the animal, his own anxiety melting away, oblivious to the fact that he was likely seeing her for the last time. In the school hallway, the atmosphere was tense. The news of the impending trapping had spread. Some students were relieved. Others, who had grown fond of the daily mystery, were sad. Caleb Miller, the lanky 8th grader, saw his chance to perform. "About time," he said loudly to his friends, loud enough for others to hear. "It's just a dumb cat. If the professionals weren't coming, I'd go in there and scare it off myself. Show it who's boss. His friends laughed, and Caleb puffed out his chest, enjoying the attention. He saw himself as the hero of a story no one else was brave enough to star in. That evening, the house was suffocatingly quiet. Sarah sat at her computer, frantically reading articles about Bobcat relocation survival rates. The numbers were grim, less than 50%. She felt sick. Leo was in his room, and for the first time in weeks, he wasn't looking at his star charts. He was on the floor with a thick piece of charcoal and a large sheet of paper. The sound from the room was not the gentle glide of a pencil, but a harsh, frantic scratching. Sarah went to his door. "Leo? Everything okay?" He didn't look up. He was completely absorbed, his arm moving back and forth, leaving thick, angry black lines on the page. She knelt beside him. The drawing was a chaotic mess of shapes, but in the center, she could make out a small, cat-like figure, tangled in a furious scribble of black lines. And next to it, a larger, blocky shape, a boy, was reaching toward it. Just then, her phone rang. It was Dr. Thorne. "Any luck, Sarah?" he asked, his voice gentle. "Have you thought of anything? Any past encounters at all? A park, a zoo, a hike?" "No, nothing," she said, her voice flat with defeat, her eyes still fixed on Leo's drawing. "He's always been so careful, so quiet in the woods." And then she stopped. The scratching of the charcoal, the tangled lines, the small, trapped animal. A memory, buried under a year of stress and worry, suddenly broke through the surface with blinding clarity. It wasn't a story Leo had told her. He wouldn't have had the words. It was an afternoon she had forgotten. A year ago, almost to the day. Leo had gone for one of his solitary walks on the trail behind their house, his quiet place. He had come home late, his clothes smudged with dirt and a long scratch on his arm. He had been agitated but silent, shutting himself in his room. She had chalked it up to a simple trip and fall. Another unexplained mood in the complex life of her son. But now, seeing the drawing, she knew it was more. The scratching of the charcoal on the paper faded from her mind, and she heard it instead. The faint, high-pitched mewing of a terrified animal. The story unfolded in her mind's eye, as if she were there. A younger Leo, walking the trail. He hears the sound, and with his unique, patient curiosity, he follows it off the path. He finds a single bobcat kitten, its hind leg hopelessly ensnared in a rusty coil of baling wire left by a farmer long ago. The kitten is exhausted, twisting and crying, making its prison tighter with every movement. Another child might have run or screamed for help. Leo did neither. He sat down a few feet away and just watched. He let the forest grow quiet around him. He let the panicked kitten get used to his presence. Then, slowly, methodically, he had crept forward. He didn't reach for the kitten. He reached for the wire. His small fingers worked at the twisted metal. The kitten hissed and spat, but it was too weak to fight. For nearly an hour, Leo had worked, patiently, silently, until the wire finally came loose. He didn't try to touch the kitten. He just backed away, took out his own water bottle, and pushed it gently across the leaves toward the freed animal. He retreated to a safe distance and watched as, minutes later, a larger bobcat, the mother, emerged from the brush. She nuzzled her kitten, licked its leg, and then, before leading it away, she had turned her head. Her yellow eyes had met Leo's across the clearing. A long, silent moment of appraisal. Then she was gone. Sarah's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God," she breathed. She dropped the phone, ran to Leo, and hugged him fiercely. He stiffened at the unexpected contact but didn't pull away. You saved her, she whispered into his hair. You saved her, kitten. She fumbled to pick up her phone. Aris, she said, her voice trembling with the force of the discovery. Aris, I know why. I know why she's here. She quickly recounted the story, her words tumbling over one another. On the other end of the line, there was a stunned silence, followed by a low whistle. Of course, Dr. Thorne said, his voice filled with a sudden electric excitement. Of course. It's not gratitude, Sarah. It's a learned association of the highest order. In her mind, Leo, his scent, his quiet presence, is not just neutral. It's linked to the survival of her offspring. She saw him solve a problem she couldn't. Coming to the school isn't a threat. She's monitoring a known, safe element in her territory. She's teaching her new litter. This place, that boy, they are safe. Sarah, this is our proof. Armed with this incredible story, they arranged an emergency meeting with Principal Harrison first thing in the morning, just hours before the trapper was scheduled to arrive. They found him in his office, sipping coffee, a look of grim finality on his face. Sarah laid out the story, her voice filled with passion and conviction. Dr. Thorne supported her, explaining the scientific plausibility of the learned behavior, presenting it as a rare and valuable opportunity for observation, not a threat. Harrison listened patiently, his hands steepled in front of him. He looked from Sarah's pleading face to Thorne's earnest one. The furrow in his brow deepened. He let out a long, slow sigh. It's a very touching story, Ms. Evans. Dr. Thorne, your theory is fascinating. He stood up and walked to his window, looking out toward the woods. But it is just that. A story. A theory. I have no video, no official report. All I have is the word of a distraught mother and an enthusiastic teacher against my duty to protect 300 children from a wild predator. He turned back to them, his face unreadable but his voice firm. I'm sorry. The decision stands. The trapper will be here at dawn. The walk back to Sarah's car was a walk of defeat. Dr. Thorne tried to offer words of encouragement, talking about appeals and petitions. But Sarah barely heard him. The bureaucratic wall was absolute. She felt a cold, hollow despair settle in her chest. She had failed her son. When she picked Leo up from his classroom, he looked at her face and his own smile faltered. Children like Leo, who struggled to read social cues, often become masters at reading the one person they trust most. He could read every line of defeat on his mother's face. The drive home was heavy with a silence far different from their usual quiet understanding. That night, Sarah tried to prepare him, a futile and heartbreaking effort. Leo, she said gently, sometimes animals have to move. They find new homes. Leo didn't look up from his drawing of the Andromeda Galaxy. He just put his hands over his ears. He didn't want to hear about a world where the things he counted on could simply disappear. Later that evening, as a cold wind rustled the last of the autumn leaves from the trees, Caleb Miller stood under the buzzing fluorescent lights of a gas station. His friends, Jordan and Mike, were daring him. "You're all talk, man," Jordan said, taking a loud slurp from his soda. "You're not going to do it." Caleb's jaw tightened. The casual mockery stung more than he would ever admit. He had built up this image of being tough, of being fearless. It was a fragile armor, and he defended it fiercely. "I'm going to do it," he snapped. "Tonight." He wasn't a monster. He didn't want to hurt anything. In his 13-year-old mind, he was just going to be the hero. He was going to solve the problem the adults were too slow to fix. He would scare the cat away. It would find a new home, and he would be the guy who had the guts to go into the woods at night. He waited until after 10, when the moon was hidden by thick clouds. The world outside his window was dark and silent. He crept out of his house, his heart pounding a nervous rhythm against his ribs. The school grounds were eerie and deserted. The only light came from a single security lamp near the entrance, casting long, distorted shadows. He walked toward the wood line, his expensive sneakers crunching on fallen leaves. The forest loomed before him, a wall of absolute blackness. It was much scarier than he had imagined. Every snap of a twig sounded like a footstep. He almost turned back. But then he thought of Jordan's smirk, and he pushed forward. He found the faint trail leading to the area where the bobcat always appeared. He picked up a handful of small rocks. "Hey, get out of here," he yelled, his voice sounding thin and shaky in the vast quiet. He threw a rock into the darkness. It clattered against a tree trunk. He threw another, this one landing with a soft thud in the leaves. "Go on. Shoo!" From deep within the brush, there was a sound he didn't expect. A low, guttural growl that was pure menace. It wasn't loud, but it vibrated through the ground, a promise of violence that sent a spike of pure fear through Caleb's body. He scrambled backward, tripped over a root, and fell hard. He didn't wait to see what happened next. He just ran. He didn't see the aftermath. He didn't see the mother bobcat, every muscle coiled, standing over her kittens. Her safe place, the place she had associated with a strange, quiet peace, was now a source of threat. Her instincts screamed one thing: danger. Without a sound, she nudged one kitten, then the other. She picked one up by the scruff of its neck and melted into the deeper, darker parts of the forest. Away from the school, away from the noise, away from the memory of the human boy who had once helped her. She would not be back. The next morning, the air was cold and damp. A white van with the state seal on its side was parked near the school entrance. A man in a durable khaki uniform stepped out. He was the trapper. He had a weathered face and practical, no-nonsense eyes. Principal Harrison met him, his face grim. Sarah had driven Leo to school, her stomach in a tight, painful knot. She parked in their usual spot, a silent vigil for something already lost. Dr. Thorne stood with them, his hands jammed in his pockets, his face a mask of frustration. "It's just a standard live trap," the trapper explained to Harrison. "We'll set it near the den, bait it with some scent lure. She'll be in it by noon. We'll take her and the kits up past the parkway, deep into national forest land." Leo sat in the car, his eyes glued to the empty wood line. He didn't understand the words, but he understood the finality in the air. 7:45 came and went. Then 8:15. The woods remained empty. A flicker of confusion crossed Leo's face. He looked at Sarah, a silent question in his eyes. She could only shake her head, her heart breaking. Principal Harrison led the trapper towards the spot Dr. Thorne had indicated on the map. "The den should be just in here," Harrison said, pointing into the dense rhododendron. The trapper pushed aside a branch, revealing a dark, hollow space under the roots of a fallen oak tree. He knelt, shining a flashlight inside. He sniffed the air. "Well," the trapper said, standing up and dusting off his knees. "She was here." Harrison looked confused. "Was?" "Yeah," the trapper said, pointing to the ground. "Tracks are a day old, maybe less. Something spooked her. She moved the kits last night. They're long gone." Harrison stared at the empty hole in the ground, a strange mix of relief and confusion on his face. He walked back to the parking lot where Sarah and Dr. Thorne were waiting. "She's gone," he announced. "Left sometime last night. The den is empty." For a second, Sarah felt a surge of elation. The bobcat was safe. But the feeling died as soon as she looked at her son. Leo had heard the words. Gone. Empty. The anchor that had held his world together had vanished. The one predictable, peaceful moment in his chaotic day was broken. His face, which had been filled with patient hope, began to crumble. The color drained from his cheeks. His breathing became shallow, then hitched into a series of ragged gasps. He looked at the empty woods, then at the school, then back at the woods. The monster was back. The noise, the chaos, the fear, it all came rushing in at once, a tidal wave of panic. But this time, it wasn't a meltdown of sound and motion. It was a terrifying, silent implosion. Before Sarah could even reach for him, he threw open the car door. He didn't run towards the school. He didn't run back to the car. He bolted. He ran straight for the empty wood line, a small, desperate figure disappearing into the cold, silent forest. Leo! Sarah's scream was a raw, primal sound that cut through the crisp morning air. She didn't think. She just ran, shoving past a stunned Principal Harrison and plunging into the tree line after her son. The cold, wet leaves slapped at her face. Thorny branches tore at her coat. Leo! Dr. Thorne was right behind her, his scientific calm shattered by the immediate crisis. Sarah, wait, don't just run blindly. But she couldn't stop. The image of her son's small back disappearing into the vast, indifferent woods was burned into her mind. Back in the parking lot, Principal Harrison stood frozen for a single, critical second. The world of paperwork, parent complaints, and liability protocols evaporated. This was real. A child was missing. A child from his school under his watch. The trapper, a man accustomed to crises, was the first to act. Call 911, he said, his voice sharp and clear. Now. Tell them we have a missing child, autistic, last seen entering the woods heading west. That single command broke Harrison's paralysis. He fumbled for his phone, his fingers shaking. He wasn't calling the school board's lawyer. He was calling for help. This is Marcus Harrison, principal at Northwood Academy, he said, his voice tight with adrenaline. I have a missing student. He relayed the information, his administrator's mind automatically providing the critical details. As he spoke, he saw the faces of other parents in the drop-off lane, their expressions turning from curiosity to alarm. The crisis was escalating with every passing second. Inside the school, the news spread like wildfire. Whispers turned to panicked rumors. Caleb Miller was in the crowded hallway when he heard it. Leo Evans, the weird kid, just ran into the woods. Caleb froze, the half-eaten granola bar in his hand, suddenly feeling like a rock in his stomach. His friends were laughing about it, treating it like some exciting drama. Dude's totally lost. Jordan snickered. But Caleb couldn't laugh. He saw the genuine panic on a teacher's face as she hurried past. He remembered the low, threatening growl from the darkness. He hadn't just scared a cat. He had broken something. He had pushed Leo over an edge, and now the boy was lost in the cold, deep woods. The bravado he'd felt the night before curdled into a cold, sickening guilt. In the forest, the search was frantic and disorganized. Sarah pushed deeper, calling Leo's name until her throat was raw. Every shadow looked like a crouching animal. Every rustle of leaves was her son. Dr. Thorne tried to bring a measure of order, looking for signs, for tracks. But the leaf-strewn ground offered no clues. An hour felt like a lifetime. The first police cars had arrived, their sirens a distant, jarring sound. Sarah was on the verge of collapsing, the sheer terror of the situation overwhelming her. He knows these woods, she kept repeating, as if trying to convince herself. He has trails he likes. Dr. Thorne stopped, his mind racing. Not running away, he muttered. Running too? He grabbed Sarah's arm gently. His quiet place, the trail behind your house. You said he freed the kitten there. Is it connected to this area? A map of the local trail system flashed in Sarah's mind. Yes, she breathed. The trailhead is less than a mile from here. He could be trying to get there. Hope, sharp and painful, pierced through her despair. Mr. Harrison, Thorne called back. This way. We think we know where he's going. Harrison, his face pale and his suit now smudged with dirt, followed without question. The trapper and a police officer followed them. They moved with new purpose, following a barely there path that wound deeper into the forest. The woods grew quieter here, the trees older and taller. After another 10 minutes of pushing through the undergrowth, Dr. Thorne held up a hand, signaling for them to stop. He pointed. Ahead, through a break in the trees, was a small, sun-dappled clearing. In the center of the clearing, sitting with his back against a huge moss-covered log, was Leo. He wasn't crying. He wasn't rocking. His hands were resting calmly in his lap. He was just sitting there, completely serene, as if he had been waiting for them. Sarah started to sob with relief, stumbling forward. Leo. But Dr. Thorne put a hand on her shoulder, holding her back. Wait, he whispered, his eyes wide. Look. Sarah followed his gaze, past her son, to the other side of the clearing. On a large, flat-topped boulder, bathed in a sliver of morning sun, sat the mother bobcat. She wasn't 15 feet from Leo. Her 2 kittens were nestled safely behind her, peering out with curious, bright eyes. The mother was not tense. She was not aggressive. She was lying in a relaxed posture, like a house cat on a windowsill, her yellow eyes fixed on the small, quiet boy. She was watching over him. The impossible scene silenced them all. Harrison, the trapper, the police officer, they all stopped dead, staring. The touching story, the unprovable theory, was laid out before them in the silent, sacred language of the forest. This was not a predator and its potential victim. This was a vigil. The mother bobcat finally lifted her head and looked at the group of stunned adults. There was no hiss, no snarl. She let out a low, guttural sound, a soft chuffing noise that was not a warning, but a communication. It was a sound of acknowledgement, directed not at them, but at the boy. An answer to a question no one had heard. Then she turned, nudged one of her kittens with her nose, and settled back down, her gaze returning to Leo. Her posture was unmistakable. The boy was safe. The adults were the intrusion. Principal Harrison slowly lifted a hand to his face, his mind struggling to reconcile the world of rules and regulations with the raw, undeniable truth in front of him. The trapper lowered his tranquilizer rifle, shaking his head in quiet disbelief. Every protocol, every risk assessment Harrison had ever studied was useless here. He had been wrong. So profoundly, dangerously wrong. He felt the weight of his decision, the near catastrophe he had almost caused, settle on him like a physical stone. The police officer looked at him, waiting for an order. The trapper looked at him, waiting for a command. The entire clearing held its breath, suspended in the silent understanding between a boy and a wildcat. Harrison lowered his hand. He turned to the trapper, his expression one of complete, shattering realization. He opened his mouth to speak, and on his next words rested the fate of this wild family, the future of the school, and the fragile peace of the small, silent boy sitting on the forest floor. Principal Harrison's voice, when it came, was quiet but carried the weight of a profound shift. "Pack it up," he said to the trapper, his eyes still locked on the impossible scene in the clearing. "We're done here." The trapper nodded once, a flicker of professional respect in his eyes. He understood. This was beyond his jurisdiction. Harrison then turned to Sarah, and for the first time, she saw the bureaucrat disappear, replaced by a man humbled by a truth he could no longer deny. "Miss Evans," he started, his voice thick with emotion. "I was wrong. I am so sorry." It was more than an apology. It was a confession. He had seen only risk, not reason. He had listened to fear, not facts. He looked at the small, silent boy. He looked at the wild, trusting animal. The weight of what he had almost destroyed crashed down on him. Sarah could only nod, tears of relief streaming down her face. She took a slow, tentative step into the clearing. Leo turned his head. He didn't smile, but the look in his eyes was one of pure, untroubled peace. He was safe. He was understood. The mother Bobcat watched Sarah approach, her body remaining relaxed. She seemed to understand that this human was part of the boy's world, a part of the safety he represented. She let out another soft chuff. Then, with a quiet grace, she nudged her kittens and slipped away, disappearing into the deep woods like a wisp of smoke. She had done her duty. Her watcher was safe. They walked out of the forest a different group than the one that had entered. The police officer radioed in that the child was found, safe and sound. The trapper packed his gear and left without another word. The crisis was over, but everything had changed. The next day, Principal Harrison called an emergency meeting with Dr. Thorne and Sarah. Caleb Miller and his parents were also there. Caleb sat staring at his shoes, the picture of misery. He had confessed everything to his parents the night before. "What I did was based on fear and protocol," Harrison began, his voice steady. "What Caleb did was based on ignorance and peer pressure. Both were wrong. Both nearly led to a tragedy." He then looked at Dr. Thorne. "Iris, you were right. We have a responsibility not just to protect our students, but to teach them. Fear comes from a lack of understanding." He slid a proposal across the table. "I want to cancel the relocation order permanently, and I want to create the Northwood Wildlife Coexistence Program. Motion-activated cameras on the trails, a curriculum on local fauna. We'll turn this entire incident into the greatest teaching moment this school has ever had. And you, Iris, will lead it." Dr. Thorne was speechless, a slow, wide grin spreading across his face. Harrison then turned to Caleb. "Your punishment will not be detention. Your punishment is to become Dr. Thorne's first assistant. You will help him build the camera enclosures. You will help him catalog the species we find. You will learn the name of every plant and animal in these woods. You will replace your ignorance with knowledge." Caleb looked up, shocked. It was more work than any detention, but he nodded eagerly, a flicker of redemption in his eyes. Finally, Harrison looked at Sarah and gestured toward the empty chair beside her. "And Leo, we need an expert. We need someone who truly understands the forest. Dr. Thorne has the science, but Leo has the connection. Would he be willing to contribute his drawings? To show us the world through his eyes?" Months passed. The cold of winter gave way to the vibrant green of a North Carolina spring. The Northwood Wildlife Coexistence Program was a resounding success. The Bobcat Cam became the most popular page on the school's website. Students could watch footage of deer, foxes, raccoons, and occasionally a fleeting glimpse of the mother bobcat and her now half-grown young. In the main hallway, a large display case was filled not with sports trophies, but with plaster casts of animal tracks, photos from the trail cameras, and at its very center, a series of stunningly detailed charcoal drawings. Leo's drawings. He had found his voice, not in words, but in lines and shadows. He was no longer the weird kid. He was the artist, the school's resident expert on the world just beyond the soccer field. He was the head of Dr. Thorne's Nature Club. One bright May morning, Sarah pulled into the school parking lot. Leo got out of the car. He no longer wore his headphones. He carried his backpack with a relaxed confidence. He said goodbye to his mother and walked toward the school entrance, chatting with another boy from the Nature Club, pointing out a hawk circling overhead. He still glanced toward the wood line. It was a habit now, a quiet acknowledgement. But he no longer needed to see her. The peace she had given him was no longer a fragile, external thing. It was inside him now. He had found his place. As Leo walked through the school doors, deep within the cool, green canopy of the forest, the mother bobcat lay on a sun-warmed rock. Her two young, now strong and sleek, wrestled nearby. She raised her head, her tufted ears twitching, and her yellow eyes gazed calmly through the leaves toward the distant brick building. Her watch was over. The boy was safe. The world was in balance. Who was the bigger threat to Leo's well-being at the beginning of the story? The bobcat or Principal Harrison's rigid rules?